Just a quick one before we start, Professor. All protocols observed. I would just like each of us to take a moment to just breathe in and breathe out, because it's been quite a long session, just to allow enough perfusion. A deep breath in. Okay, now you can give us back and start counting.
Okay. She's a medical doctor, so she's giving us some medical practice. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Let's roll.
All right, that is Team Integrity. We have Emmanuel just on my right, Christopher, Laurentina, and Esther. Next slide, please. Facilitating conflict resolution in organizations, areas managers should focus on. Next, please. Have the outline of our presentation: introduction, definition, types of conflict, why conflict resolution as managers, methods of conflict resolution skills for managers, recommendations, conclusion. So let us just sit back and have a moment. Emmanuel, please take us away.
That was the third call you've disconnected today. Listen, Robert, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but if you don't start doing a better job soon, we're going to have a real problem here. A lot of that isn't my fault. I'm doing the best that I can. No idea how much I have on my plate right now. Okay, I'm taking care of my mother, and I'm going to this night class. Look, I'm sorry you have personal problems, but this is a business. Either you step it up, or you're gonna have to find yourself another job. But I'm going to that night class so that I can do better at this job. Look, I'm a good employee, and I work hard. Everybody here knows that. I'm glad you have fans here, but the fact is, everything I've asked you to do in the last 2 weeks has taken twice as long as it should. Not to mention that I've had to redo half of it. I'm sorry, but I don't think it's quite fair that everything gets blamed on me. I don't have time for this. Just do your job, okay?
Thank you. You know, every time you're late, I have to pick up your slack.
My mornings have been really tough with the kids lately. I'm sorry that's affected you.
Well, you're going to have to get that figured out, because that was just 20 minutes of covering both phones.
I really am sorry. I've been there before and I know what a drag it is.
Yeah, it's really stressful.
I promise I'll be on time from now.
I appreciate it.
All righty. You can continue.
Okay, our introduction. Conflicts have a considerable impact on the working environment, employees, and the organization. The impact is usually associated with a dual nature. There can be either a negative or a positive outcome that may arise from this. As a leader, while conflict resolution is a skill that is best built through years of experience, starting out with some of the most common and effective conflict resolution studies will give a strong foundation to work from as years to come. Next slide, please. What is conflict? Michael Nicholson defines conflict as an activity that takes place when individuals or groups wish to carry out mutually inconsistent acts concerning wants and needs or obligations. Conflicts can either be internal or external. In internal conflicts, one can have wants which need to be achieved at the same time in the same place, whilst external conflicts would be between different peoples. An example is a workplace conflict. Next, please. In as much as we know that there are different types of conflict in the workplace, the focus that we will bring in terms of projection are the three that you have in front of you: relationship conflict, task conflict, process conflict. So in relationship conflict, it's where you have two entities that are trying to solve a problem and they realize that their emotions and feelings are coming in the way. Task conflict, it takes us back to the video. In that small clip, we noted that there was a task ahead that was set, and it was failed to be done because there were issues of disagreement. When it comes to process conflict, it's been what all of us have had to go in terms of making the success of these projects, that they have been distribution in terms of work, of who puts in much of what is wanted. Next slide, please. So among the distribution, like we had previously said, in terms of the negatives or positives of conflicts, a study was done by a Canadian company that shows different distributions in terms of one, first, on our left, we look at the negative conflicts. That 77, which was the highest percentage of those that were there, were those that out of that were sucked out of or left the organization. You have people leaving organizations because they feel frustrated. Others out of the 77 where employees turn to give excuses of either sickness or absent themselves from actual workplaces. And then we also have issues of attacks in terms of insults. Other employees got sacked, which was the lowest at 43%. Moving on to our right, it showed that under the positive effects of the conflicts, the highest was the 77%, that it is better to come up with understandings among others in making sure that conflicts are resolved, followed by high performance of team, which is where we need to make sure that all those are also addressed. We also noted that solutions to changing problems and challenges were at 57%. So noting that the high performance, the better understanding, and the solutions work together gave a majority in terms of the pie chart of the distribution according to this Canadian study. Next slide, please. So why should conflict resolution be looked at in terms of us as managers? A study was done by CIPD 2020, which revealed that the majority of the destructive effects of conflicts, such as stress, drop in motivation, commitment, anxiety, were significantly more experienced by non-managers as opposed to managers. Both the negative consequences and the positive were a result from the conflicts. Implication of this for organization meant that implementation of effective conflict management strategies were needed to limit or eliminate the negative effects of conflicts and therefore draw up the benefits from them. Henceforth, we need managers to be well informed that conflict management and resolution techniques help and can be implemented effectively when need arises. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? The process of ending a dispute and reaching an argument that satisfies parties should be involved. And we need to address the underlying issues of a conflict and to focus on the relationship and communication between the parties. Therefore, representing that man in between, trying to make sure that everything is amicably resolved on both ends. Next slide, please. We have different models that were developed in terms of addressing conflict resolution. Several strategies have existed. We've got the distributive bargaining, using the power to achieve what was wanted, approaches that were provided by Linsky, Besser, and Finner. Then we've got the Thomas Kilmann Model Institution. Next, please. So the Thomas Kilmann conflict model of instrument is what is mainly used. We have the uncooperative stuff, which is on your left, where conflict model could be issues of competing. One wants to win and get above the other. Avoidance model also. The avoidance model looks at where you avoid conflicts in order to delay and think about how you are going to resolve. And then on the cooperative side, we have collaborating. This is where one needs to give or put in defense and make sure that each of the solutions or decisions are actually sorted in a win-win type of solution. Accommodating. In accommodating, one needs to withhold for the sake of peace to make sure that progression still continues. Then you've got compromising. The goal is to find out a middle ground. Where do we reach a point of understanding? So all these 5 models is what we have adopted and what mainly is being used among all other types of researchers from the ones that was previously given. Next slide. So how do managers then identify skills in terms of ensuring that the resolutions of conflict are done? First, you need to spot signs of conflict. You need to separate the what from the why. Ask the right questions. Get to the bottom of why the conflict has actually happened or what is triggering it. Frame discussions objectively. Take points from each other aspect of the people that are involved. And at times, it means you need to make the hard decisions in terms of making sure that the organization still runs. Next slide, please. So, shall we sit back and listen to what recommendations we came up with as team members present the recommendation of conflict resolution?
Conflict is inevitable in any way. But it managed effectively with the right approach. Now, to do this, it will involve identifying the underlying issues that are contributing to the conflict and addressing them directly. By identifying these root causes, managers and leaders can work to address them proactively and prevent future conflicts from arising.
Again, another salient point to note in resolving workplace conflict is effective communication strategies. One of the most important skills for facilitating conflict resolution in the workplace is effective communication. This involves actively listening to all parties involved, validating their perspective, and working collaboratively to find a solution that meets everyone's needs. Some effective communication strategies for resolving workplace conflicts include using I statements instead of you statements, focusing on specific behaviors rather than generalizations, and then also avoid blame or judgment. By using these strategies, managers and leaders can help de-escalate tensions and facilitate productive conversations.
Creating a culture of respect and inclusion. Under this strategy, it involves promoting diversity, equity, inclusiveness in initiatives. That is promoting trainings and resources on cultural competences. It also fosters an environment where employees feel valued and respected.
Recommendation for conflict resolution in workplaces is using mediation and conflict resolution techniques. In some cases, conflict may require assistance of a neutral third party to facilitate resolution. This is where mediation and conflict resolution techniques come into play. Some common mediation and conflict resolution techniques include active listening, reframing, brainstorming, and compromise. By using these techniques, managers and leaders can help resolve conflict in a productive way.
Establishing clear policies and procedures for conflict resolution. Another important aspect of facilitating conflict resolution in the workplace is establishing clear policies and procedures for handling conflicts when they arise. This involves outlining the steps that employees should take if they experience or witness conflict, as well as the consequences for violating these policies. By establishing clear policies and procedures, managers and leaders can ensure that conflicts are handled consistently and fairly across the organization. This can help to prevent conflicts from escalating and ensure that all employees feel safe and supported in the workplace.
So the last recommendation that we are going to talk about in this project is to continually evaluate and improve conflict resolution processes. Finally, it is important for managers and leaders to continuously evaluate and then improve their conflict resolution processes. This involves soliciting feedback from employees on their experience with conflict resolution, identifying areas for improvement, and then implementing changes as needed. By continuously evaluating and improving their conflict resolution processes, managers and leaders can ensure that they are staying up to date with the best practices and updating to the changing needs of the organization. This can help to promote a culture of open communication and collaboration, which can prevent conflicts from arising in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, so there we have it. What we noted was that in terms of what we had brought to you were that we need to find out the root causes, strategies in terms of communication, cultural respect needs to come into play, mediation and resolutions need to also come into play, and we also need to make sure that we have clear procedures and policies, and that in everything that is done, there is need for evaluation and to make sure that we are updated. So in conclusion, they will, and we cannot avoid conflicts at any other point. So our perceptions will differ. We need to make sure that there is a balance in terms of how the conflicts are addressed, and that even in the findings out of whether a negative conflict is able to bring out positive results, because new ideas, new understandings can be able to be found from the confrontations that I had. Next slide, please. These were the references that we had. Otherwise, we thank you so much for your listening attentively. We appreciate you. Thank you, Professor, and your team. All protocols observed. It's now time for your questions.
Thank you very much, Team Integrity. That's a very powerful presentation. I could see Emma smiling because she taught the class on conflict, and so clearly you guys nailed it. Thank you so much for the innovation, the responses, and the quality of work presented. If the judges have any questions, they are welcome to ask those questions. Otherwise, our last group for the day. Okay, Caroline, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you for the presentation and the information you shared on conflict resolution. I would like to have a look at slide number 8. I was a little bit lost in the math, similar to former concern from Dr. Chibuna, because I was looking at, for example, solutions to problem and challenges, 57%. What happened to the 43 in that particular field, if this is a separate study? So please elaborate how you decided to have these pie charts presented like this, because it's giving us not a 200%. If I look at increased motivation, from one end it's 81, to the other end it's 31. What happened to the remaining percentages in that field of increased motivation? Yeah, please respond.
Good question. Thank you so much. Tim, anyone can respond to that?
Emmanuel? Go, Chris.
Okay. So, Albert can speak. Hello.
We can hear you.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, so it was a study that was done in a company in Canada. And so the employees were asked some of these questions, and then some of the ways that were used to solve the problem that occurred in the company. So it was statistically collated. So their responses was the one that gave the percentages. So it will not be equal to 100. the case being that some people had different views onto the questions that were being asked. So you can't have maybe 100% bar charts, something, but then the number of responses that were gotten were what was collated.
Okay. I see, Edward, your hand is up from Zambia. You want to save them or ask them questions? Edward? Okay, I think Edward hand is up.
Yeah, maybe I can respond in the meantime.
Yes.
So looking from a presentation point of view of information, this may be very misleading, especially in terms of how it's presented, unless you provide a very detailed information about it. Why? If you are using numbers, for example, right? If you are giving us that 18 and this and this and this, then it would really give us that overview. But it's just a recommendation that if you're using numbers, actual numbers of the sample number, this amount, then because a pie chart, it's 100% and at a glance, I should be able to intercept the information. But when I look at this, I have to ask myself, why are we at more than 100%? You understand? So that's just a recommendation that even if you're using a research paper and it is mentioning 40% of this is being used here, if you don't have the other 60%, then either use a different method of presentation so that the message arrives home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Edward, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready, Professor.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I heard the guys, the integrity guys, speaking about conflict resolution. So I do have a question. And my question is, do you think knowing how to do or resolve conflicts has something to do with innovative leadership? And how can we prevent, quiet quitting by creating an environment that is, conducive for people to speak through their honest truth? And how can leaders on the top become, vulnerable enough to allow their, subordinates to be free people or free employees to speak to them? So those are few a contribution, I think, and the question is, how can we, use conflict to create an environment that is, developing or encouraging innovative leadership? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edward, all the way from the Zambia. Anyone from the team integrity want to respond?
I'll give it to our members. Christopher, do you want to respond? Esther, Lantina.
Okay, so I want to add something up here. So in our recommendation, one of the recommendations that we gave was about establishing clear policies and procedures for conflict resolution. So we said that one of the ways or the aspects of facilitating conflict in the organization was to make sure that we have a clear policy. So if these organograms or if these ways of resolving conflict are there in an organized manner, it will help the managers to be able to deal with the conflict as and when they come. One thing that we should know is that conflicts are inevitable, but if you have structures in place to be able to solve that conflict so that it will not escalate, will be the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, it's talking about containment of conflicts, because whether we like it or not, it will be in the midst of us, but the management and the containment of it is what matters. Thank you very much, Team Integrity, for such a powerful presentation for your group.